She walked into the hospital with 4, he walked in with an apology. The Millionaire CEO's reunion ended with a match. You don't get to walk in and fix 10 years with an apology. Her voice was steady, cold even, but her hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the hospital chair. The fluorescent lights above hummed quietly, casting harsh shadows across the waiting room. Dominic Hale stood before her, the man who once promised her forever, now reduced to a shell of the confident CEO the world knew. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, were now red-rimmed and desperate. "I know," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I know, Amira. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to live long enough to earn it." She stared at him, this stranger wearing the face of the man she once loved. "You left me," she said, her voice breaking for the first time. "You left us. When I needed you most. When they needed you most. And now you come back because you need us." Dominic's knees buckled slightly. He caught himself against the wall, his expensive suit rumpled, his usually perfectly styled hair disheveled. "I know what I did. I know I don't deserve anything from you. But those children, our children, they might be the only thing that can save my life. And God, Amira, I'm so sorry." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with a decade of pain, regret, and unanswered questions. This is their story. A story of love that died and second chances that shouldn't exist. A story of 4 heartbeats that changed everything. A story of a millionaire who lost everything that mattered, and a woman who raised an empire of her own with nothing but love and determination. This is the story of Dominic Hale and Amira Lawson. And it begins not with their meeting, not with their romance, but with the moment everything fell apart. 10 years earlier. Amira Lawson had never been the kind of woman who believed in fairy tales. Growing up in a modest household in the suburbs, she learned early that life was built on hard work, not wishes. Her parents were good people, hard-working people, the kind who taught her that character mattered more than status and that integrity was worth more than gold. She was 26 when she met Dominic Hale, and she had no idea who he was. It was a Thursday evening in September. Amira had just finished her shift at the community health clinic where she worked as a nursing assistant. She was exhausted, her feet ached, and all she wanted was to grab a coffee and collapse on her couch with a good book. The small cafe on Maple Street was her sanctuary, a quiet place where she could decompress after long days of caring for patients who often had more problems than solutions. She was standing in line, scrolling through her phone, when someone behind her spoke. "Is the caramel latte here any good?" She looked up. The man standing behind her was tall, well-dressed in a way that seemed effortless, with dark hair and eyes that held a kind of focused intensity. But there was something softer there too, something curious and almost vulnerable. "It's decent," Amira replied with a small smile. "But the hazelnut mocha is better if you like things a little sweeter." He smiled back, and it transformed his face completely. "Hazelnut mocha it is then. Thanks for the tip." They ended up sitting at the same table by accident. The cafe was crowded that evening, and when Amira found a spot by the window, he approached hesitantly. "Mind if I sit here? Everywhere else is full." She gestured to the empty chair. "Go ahead." His name was Dominic. He didn't offer a last name, and she didn't ask. They talked about small things at first. Books. The weather. The oddly specific way the barista called out orders. He was easy to talk to, surprisingly so. He listened when she spoke, actually listened, not just waiting for his turn to talk. And when he laughed at something she said, it was genuine, unguarded. "What do you do?" he asked after a while. "I'm a nursing assistant," she said. "I work at the community clinic downtown. What about you?" He hesitated for just a fraction of a second. "I work in real estate." It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Dominic Hale was the heir to Hale Properties, one of the largest real estate development companies in the country. His father, Richard Hale, was a legend in the industry, a man who had built an empire from nothing and expected his son to carry it forward. But sitting in that cafe with Amira, Dominic didn't want to be the heir, the future CEO, the man with $1 billion legacy hanging over his head. He just wanted to be a guy having coffee with an interesting woman. They talked until the cafe closed. And then they stood outside on the sidewalk, neither of them quite ready to leave. "Can I see you again?" Dominic asked. Amira studied him for a moment. There was something about him that intrigued her, something genuine beneath the polished exterior. "Yeah," she said finally. "I'd like that." That was how it began. For 8 months, they built something neither of them had expected. Dominic took her to places that had nothing to do with wealth or status. Hidden bookstores tucked away in old buildings. Late-night diners where they shared fries and talked until dawn. A lake house his family owned but rarely used, where they spent weekends wrapped in blankets, watching the sun rise over the water. He told her things he'd never told anyone. About the pressure of being Richard Hale's son. About the expectations that felt like chains. About the loneliness of growing up with everything except the freedom to choose his own path. "My father built this empire," Dominic said one night as they sat on the dock at the lake house, their feet dangling in the cool water. "And he expects me to not just maintain it, but expand it. Every decision I make is scrutinized. Every relationship is analyzed for how it might affect the company. Sometimes I feel like I'm not even a person anymore. Just an extension of Hale Properties." Amira leaned her head against his shoulder. "You're more than that. You know that, right? You're more than what your father built." He turned to look at her, his eyes searching her face. "When I'm with you, I believe that. You make me feel like I can be someone other than who they expect me to be." She smiled softly. "You can be whoever you want to be, Dominic. That's the whole point of life." He kissed her then, slow and tender, and in that moment, he believed her. Amira, for her part, fell in love with the man he was when he wasn't trying to be anyone else. She loved his curiosity about the world, the way he asked questions about her work and actually cared about the answers. She loved how he remembered small details, like how she took her coffee or which author she was currently reading. She loved the way he looked at her, like she was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. But she also noticed the moments when his phone would ring and his entire demeanor would shift. The way his jaw would tighten when he saw his father's name on the screen. The stress that would creep into his shoulders after certain calls. She knew there was a part of his life he wasn't sharing with her, but she didn't push. She figured he would open up when he was ready. What she didn't know was that Dominic was standing at a crossroads. His father had been hinting for months that it was time for Dominic to step up, to take a more active role in the company. The board of directors was watching him, evaluating him, waiting to see if he had what it took to lead Hale Properties into the next generation. And then came the night that changed everything. It was a Thursday evening, almost exactly 8 months after they'd met. Amira had been feeling off for a few days. Tired, nauseous, emotional in ways that didn't make sense. She'd brushed it off as stress from work, but when the symptoms persisted, she decided to see a doctor. The pregnancy test came back positive. She sat in the examination room, staring at the ultrasound screen, listening to the technician's voice as if from a great distance. "Well," the technician said with a smile. "This is unusual. But it looks like you're carrying quadruplets. 4 babies. Congratulations. 4. 4 heartbeats flickering on the screen. 4 lives. 4 futures." Amira felt the world tilt. Joy, terror, disbelief, and wonder crashed over her in waves. She was going to be a mother. Not just a mother. A mother of 4. The technician was saying something about high-risk pregnancies and specialist care and frequent monitoring, but Amira could barely process the words. All she could think was, I have to tell Dominic. She drove to his apartment in a daze, her mind spinning with 1,000 thoughts. They'd never explicitly talked about children, about the future in concrete terms. But she loved him. And she believed he loved her. They would figure this out together. They had to. Dominic opened the door with a smile that faded the moment he saw her face. Amira? What's wrong? Are you okay? She stepped inside, her hands shaking. We need to talk. They sat on his couch, and she told him. She told him about the doctor's appointment, about the ultrasound, about the 4 tiny heartbeats that were now growing inside her. She watched his face as she spoke, watched the emotions flicker across his features. Shock, confusion, fear. 4, he repeated, his voice hollow. 4 babies? Yes, she whispered. I know this is unexpected. I know we didn't plan this. But Dominic, we can do this. Together. I know it's scary, but... Amira, stop. His voice was sharp, cutting through her words like a blade. She froze. I can't do this, he said, his face pale. I can't have this right now. She stared at him, not comprehending. What do you mean? He stood up, pacing across the room, his hands running through his hair. My father just named me incoming CEO. The board is watching every move I make. Investors are evaluating whether I'm stable enough, focused enough, to lead the company. If I show up with a family scandal, if I have 4 babies with a woman they've never even met, it'll destroy everything I've been working toward. The words hit her like physical blows. A family scandal, she repeated, her voice breaking. Is that what this is to you? A scandal? Amira, you don't understand the pressure I'm under. This company, it's my entire life. My father, the board, the investors, they're all counting on me. I can't afford any distractions right now. Distractions? She stood up, her legs unsteady. These are your children, Dominic. Our children. 4 lives. And you're calling them distractions? He wouldn't look at her. I'm not ready to be a father. I can't do this. You mean you won't? The silence that followed was deafening. Amira waited, hoping he would take it back, hoping he would reach for her, tell her he was scared but that they'd figure it out together. But he just stood there, his back to her, his shoulders tense. I think you should go, he said finally, his voice cold. She felt something inside her shatter. All the love, all the hope, all the dreams she built around this man crumbled in an instant. She walked to the door on numb legs, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall in front of him. At the threshold, she turned back one last time. I loved you, she said quietly. I really did. I hope whatever you're building is worth it. Because you just walked away from something real. He didn't respond. Didn't turn around. Didn't stop her. And that was the last time Amira Lawson saw Dominic Hale for 10 years. The months that followed were the hardest of Amira's life. Her pregnancy was classified as extremely high risk from the beginning. Carrying quadruplets put enormous strain on her body, and she was in and out of hospitals constantly. There were days when she could barely stand, when the weight of 4 growing lives inside her felt like it might crush her. Her mother, Grace, moved in to help. Grace Lawson was a woman of quiet strength, the kind who didn't waste words but showed love through action. She cooked, cleaned, drove Amira to appointments, and held her daughter when the fear and exhaustion became too much. You're going to get through this, Grace would say, stroking Amira's hair as she cried. You're stronger than you know, baby girl. And these babies, they're lucky to have you. Amira's father, Mike, worked extra shifts to help cover the mounting medical bills. The costs were astronomical. Every appointment, every ultrasound, every specialist consultation added up. Amira had to cut back her hours at the clinic, and eventually, she couldn't work at all. The financial pressure was suffocating. There were nights when she lay awake, her hands on her swollen belly, feeling the 4 distinct movements inside her, and wondered how she was going to make it. How she was going to bring these babies into the world alone. How she was going to provide for them, raise them, give them the life they deserved. But every time despair threatened to consume her, she would feel a flutter, a kick, a reminder that she wasn't doing this for herself. She was doing it for them. For little souls who didn't ask to be born into this situation but deserved every chance at life anyway. She never heard from Dominic. Not once. No phone calls. No messages. No flowers or cards or even an acknowledgement that he knew she was still pregnant. It was as if she had never existed in his life at all. And that hurt more than anything. On a freezing night in February, at 32 weeks pregnant, Amira went into labor. It was too early, far too early, and the doctors worked frantically to delay the delivery. But her body had reached its limit. After hours of pain and fear and prayers whispered through gritted teeth, 4 tiny babies entered the world. They were so small. So fragile. Each one fighting for every breath in the neonatal intensive care unit, hooked up to machines and monitors, their tiny chests rising and falling with mechanical assistance. Amira named them through tears, her mother holding her hand. Elijah, she whispered, looking at the first. Zara. Caleb. And Nadia. 4 names. 4 lives. 4 miracles. The doctors warned her that the first 72 hours were critical. That the babies were extremely premature and faced significant risks. That she should prepare herself for the possibility that not all of them would make it. But Amira refused to accept that. She sat by their incubators day and night, talking to them, singing to them, willing them to fight. "You're fighters," she whispered to Elijah, the smallest of the 4. "You came into this world fighting, and you're going to keep fighting. All of you. Because you're mine. And I'm never giving up on you." Grace stood beside her, silent tears streaming down her face. "They're beautiful, Amira. Just like their mother." "I don't know how I'm going to do this, Mom," Amira said, her voice breaking. 4 babies. Alone. I don't know if I'm strong enough." Grace squeezed her hand. "You are. You've already proven that. And you're not alone. You have us. You have your family. We're going to get through this together." 3 weeks later, after a terrifying and exhausting ordeal, all 4 babies were finally stable enough to go home. Amira brought them to the small 2-bedroom apartment she'd managed to afford with her parents' help. It wasn't much. The walls were thin, the carpet was worn, and the heating system was temperamental at best. But it was theirs. She set up 4 cribs in one bedroom, arranged in a careful cluster so she could reach all of them quickly during nighttime feedings. The apartment was filled with donated baby clothes, hand-me-down strollers, and supplies she'd gathered from every resource she could find. And so began the hardest, most exhausting, most beautiful chapter of her life. Raising quadruplets alone was not just difficult. It was overwhelming in ways Amira could never have anticipated. There were nights when all 4 babies cried at once, when she was so exhausted she could barely remember her own name, when she sat on the floor surrounded by diapers and bottles and burp cloths and sobbed because she didn't know how she was going to make it through the next hour, let alone the next day. But she did. Somehow, impossibly, she did. Grace helped as much as she could, but she and Mike still had to work. Amira took on nursing shifts at odd hours, working when her mother could watch the babies, sleeping in fragmented chunks whenever she got the chance. She became an expert at multitasking, at feeding 2 babies while burping another, at changing diapers with one hand while answering a work call with the other. Every milestone felt like a miracle. The first time Elijah smiled. The first time Zara giggled. The first time Caleb rolled over. The first time Nadia reached for her mother's face with tiny, perfect fingers. "Mama," Nadia said one morning when she was just over a year old. It was the first word any of them had spoken, and Amira burst into tears of joy. "That's right, baby girl," she whispered, pulling Nadia into her arms. "I'm your mama. And I'm always going to be here for you. Always." As the children grew, they developed distinct personalities. Elijah was the cautious one, thoughtful and observant, always watching before he acted. Zara was fierce and protective, the natural leader of the group, always the first to speak up when something wasn't fair. Caleb was the gentle soul, sensitive and kind, the one who cried when others were hurt. And Nadia was the wild card, curious and adventurous, always getting into things she shouldn't. They were a unit, the four of them. They fought and played and protected each other with a ferocity that amazed everyone who knew them. They had their own language, their own games, their own world that existed just between the four of them. And Amira loved them with an intensity that sometimes scared her. They were everything. Her reason for waking up every morning. Her motivation to keep going when things got hard. Her greatest accomplishment. As the years passed, Amira slowly built a better life for them. She went back to school part-time, studying while the kids slept, determined to become a nurse practitioner so she could provide more stability for her family. It took years. There were times when she wanted to give up, when the exhaustion and stress felt like too much. But she kept going, driven by the four faces that greeted her every morning with smiles and hugs. By the time the quadruplets turned 7, Amira had graduated and secured a position at a well-respected clinic. The pay was better, the hours more stable. She was able to move them out of the cramped apartment into a small but comfortable house in a decent neighborhood. It had a backyard where the kids could play, a kitchen where they could eat dinner together, bedrooms where they each had their own space for the first time in their lives. It still wasn't easy. Money was always tight. There were school expenses and medical bills and 1,000 little things that added up. But they were making it. More than making it. They were thriving. The children sometimes asked about their father. It was inevitable. They saw other kids with dads at school events, heard their friends talk about their fathers. Amira had prepared herself for these questions, but they still hurt every time. "Why don't we have a dad?" Caleb asked one evening when he was 8. They were sitting at the dinner table, and the question came out of nowhere, innocent and curious. Amira set down her fork, choosing her words carefully. "You do have a dad. He lives far away. And he's not able to be part of our lives right now. Did he not want us?" Zara asked, her voice harder, more challenging. Even at 8, Zara had a way of cutting to the heart of things. Amira looked at her daughter, at all four of them watching her with those eyes, those beautiful eyes that looked so much like Dominic's. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Grown-up things sometimes are. But what you need to know is that it has nothing to do with you. You four are the most amazing, wonderful children in the world. And if someone isn't here to see that, it's their loss. Not yours. Do you miss him?" Nadia asked softly. Amira considered the question. Did she miss Dominic? The man who abandoned her when she needed him most. The man who walked away from four beautiful souls without a backward glance. "I miss the person I thought he was," she said honestly. "But the person he turned out to be? No. I don't miss him. Because I have you four. And you're all I need." Elijah reached across the table and took her hand. "We love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. All of you. So much." They never brought up their father again after that conversation. It was as if they collectively decided that it didn't matter. They had their mother. They had each other. That was enough. And for years, it was. While Amira was building a life from nothing, Dominic Hale was climbing the ladder of success. After he became CEO of Hale Properties, He threw himself into work with a single-minded determination that impressed everyone around him. He was ruthless in negotiations, brilliant in strategy, relentless in his pursuit of growth. Under his leadership, Hale Properties expanded into new markets, acquired competitors, and doubled its valuation in just 5 years. Dominic became a fixture in business magazines, profiled as one of the most successful young CEOs in the country. His face was on billboards, his name mentioned in financial circles with respect and admiration. From the outside, he had everything: wealth, power, influence, respect. But inside, Dominic was hollow. He dated occasionally, relationships that never went anywhere because he could never fully connect with anyone. He attended galas and fundraisers and board meetings, playing the role of the successful CEO, but he felt like an actor on a stage, performing a part that had nothing to do with who he really was. Late at night, alone in his penthouse apartment overlooking the city, he would think about Amira. About the way she laughed. About the conversations they had. About the look on her face when he told her to leave. He thought about the babies. 4 of them. They would be growing up somewhere, living lives he knew nothing about. Did they look like him? Did they have Amira's smile? Were they happy? The guilt was a constant weight, a shadow that followed him everywhere. He told himself he'd made the right choice for his career, that he couldn't have built what he'd built if he'd been tied down with a family. But deep down, he knew the truth. He'd been a coward. He'd chosen ambition over love, success over integrity. And now he was paying the price. His father noticed the change in him. Richard Hale was not a sentimental man, but he knew his son, and he could see something was wrong. "You've done well, Dominic," Richard said one evening over dinner. "Better than I expected, to be honest. The company is thriving. You should be proud." "I am," Dominic replied automatically. "But you're not happy." Dominic looked up, surprised. Richard rarely talked about feelings or personal matters. "Happiness isn't the goal," Dominic said, echoing words his father had told him 1,000 times growing up. "Success is." Richard studied him for a long moment. "I used to believe that. I built this company on that principle. But you know what I realized too late? Success without purpose is just noise. And if you're not careful, you'll wake up one day and realize you've spent your whole life building something that doesn't actually matter." "Are you saying the company doesn't matter?" "I'm saying the company isn't everything. I learned that the hard way. Don't make the same mistake I did." But Dominic didn't know how to be anything other than what he'd become. The CEO. The businessman. The man who chose ambition over everything else. He'd made his choice 10 years ago, and now he had to live with it. Or so he thought. It happened on a Tuesday morning in October. Dominic was in the middle of a board meeting, presenting quarterly earnings and discussing expansion plans, when the world suddenly tilted. The room spun. His vision blurred. He reached for the table to steady himself, but his legs gave out. He heard voices, distant and distorted, as he collapsed to the floor. Someone was calling his name. Someone else was calling for help. And then everything went black. He woke up in a hospital room, his father sitting in a chair by the bed, looking older and more worried than Dominic had ever seen him. "What happened?" Dominic asked, his voice hoarse. "You collapsed," Richard said. "You've been unconscious for 6 hours. The doctors have been running tests." A physician entered the room moments later, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a serious expression. She introduced herself as Dr. Patricia White, a specialist in hematology. "Mr. Hale," she began, pulling up a chair. "I'm not going to sugarcoat this. The tests show that you have a condition called hematologic mitochondrial degeneration. It's extremely rare. It affects the way your body produces and maintains healthy blood cells, and over time, it can lead to organ failure. The words didn't fully register at first. Dominic stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "What's the treatment?" he asked. "Dar." White's expression was sympathetic but honest. "There are some medications that can slow the progression, but they're not a cure. The only viable long-term treatment is a genetic stem cell infusion. It requires a donor who is a close biological match. Siblings are ideal, but biological children are the most likely to be compatible." Dominic's heart sank. "I don't have siblings. Or children. No wife. No former partners who might have had your child." The question hit him like a freight train. Images flooded his mind. Amira's face. The ultrasound screen. 4 heartbeats. He stopped, his throat tight. "There might be. I don't know. It was a long time ago." Dr. White nodded. "I understand this is a lot to take in. But if there's any possibility that you have biological children out there, you need to find them. Without a genetic match, your prognosis is not good. We're looking at maybe 2 to 3 years, possibly less." 2 to 3 years. The room felt like it was closing in on him. Dominic looked at his father, who was pale and silent, and then back at the doctor. "What if I can't find them?" "Then we do everything we can with medication and treatment," Dr. White said gently. "But I won't lie to you, Mr. Hale. Your best chance at survival is finding a biological match. And the sooner, the better." That night, alone in his hospital room, Dominic Hale broke down. Not because he was dying. Death, he could accept. Death was logical, inevitable, the end of the line for everyone eventually. No, he broke down because he finally understood what he had destroyed. 10 years ago, he had walked away from Amira and 4 unborn children because he was afraid of how they might interfere with his career, with his image, with his carefully constructed life. He had chosen success over love, ambition over family, and he had told himself it was the right decision. Now, those 4 children, those 4 lives he had abandoned, might be the only thing that could save him. The irony was so bitter it was almost funny. Almost. He thought about Amira carrying those babies alone. Going through the pregnancy without support. Raising 4 children by herself while he was climbing the corporate ladder and attending galas and living in luxury. The guilt was suffocating. And now he was going to have to find her, face her, ask her for help after everything he'd done. He didn't deserve it. He knew that. He didn't deserve her forgiveness, didn't deserve to even speak to those children, didn't deserve a second chance. But he was desperate. And desperation had a way of making people do things they never thought they would. The next morning, Dominic called a private investigator. Not just any investigator. He wanted the best, someone who could find people who didn't want to be found. After some research, he settled on James Reed, a retired federal detective known for his discretion and his results. James Reed was in his late 50s, a tall man with graying hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened as Dominic explained the situation, his expression neutral. "Let me get this straight," James said when Dominic finished. 10 years ago, you walked away from a pregnant woman carrying your quadruplets. You've had no contact since. And now you want me to find her because you need one of those kids to save your life. Dominic flinched at the bluntness of the summary. Yes. James leaned back in his chair, studying him. That's pretty cold, Mr. Hale. I know. Why should I help you? Dominic met his gaze. Because I'm not asking you to help me. I'm asking you to help find 4 children who deserve to know their father exists, even if he's a coward who doesn't deserve them. And because if one of them can save my life, I might have the chance to actually try to make things right. James was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right. I'll take the case. But I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Hale. Finding her is the easy part. The hard part is going to be facing what you did. And if this woman wants nothing to do with you, I won't blame her. Neither will I, Dominic said quietly. He handed James a photograph. It was the only one he had kept, hidden in a drawer in his desk for 10 years. Amira, smiling at the camera, her eyes bright and full of life. It had been taken on one of their weekends at the lake house, before everything fell apart. James took the photo. I'll find her. Give me a week. It took James Reed less than a week. He was good at his job, and the trail, though old, wasn't impossible to follow. He started with hospital records, tracking down the facility where Amira had given birth. From there, he followed a series of addresses, unpaid medical bills, and school registrations. What he found was both heartbreaking and impressive. Amira Lawson had not only survived. She had thrived. She had gone back to school, earned her degree, and built a career. She was now a respected nurse practitioner at a community clinic, known for her compassion and her dedication to underserved populations. And the children. The quadruplets. James found them at a local elementary school. 4 kids, all 9 years old, with Dominic's unmistakable eyes and Amira's warm smile. They were well-adjusted, happy, involved in sports and clubs and after-school activities. They clearly adored their mother and each other. James watched them from a distance one afternoon, saw the way Amira picked them up from school, the way they all piled into her modest car, laughing and talking over each other. He saw the love there, the bond that had been built over 10 years of struggle and sacrifice and unwavering commitment. And he felt a deep respect for Amira Lawson. When he delivered his report to Dominic, he didn't mince words. I found them, James said, handing over a file with addresses, photographs, and details. Amira Lawson. She's living in a suburb about 40 miles from here. She works at a community clinic. The kids are healthy, happy, and well cared for. She did it all on her own, Mr. Hale. She raised 4 children without a dime of your money or a word of your support. And she did a damn good job. Dominic opened the file with shaking hands. The first thing he saw was a recent photo of Amira. She looked older, but still beautiful. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, a weariness that spoke of years of hard work. But there was also a strength in her expression, a resilience that took his breath away. Then he saw the children. 4 faces staring back at him from a school photograph. Elijah. Zara. Caleb. Nadia. Their names were listed in James' notes. They were his. There was no denying it. They had his eyes, his bone structure, even some of his expressions. But they also had Amira's warmth, her kindness, her spirit. They're beautiful, Dominic whispered. They are, James agreed. And they don't know you exist. According to my research, Amira told them their father lives far away and isn't part of their lives. She hasn't spoken badly of you, but she hasn't given them any illusions either. Dominic closed the file, his chest tight. What do I do now? James shook his head. That's not for me to decide, Mr. Hale. But if you're going to approach her, you better be ready. Because that woman has been through hell, and if you hurt her or those kids again, you're going to have to answer for it. And not just to her. I won't hurt them again, Dominic said firmly. I swear it. Words are easy, Mr. Hale. It's the follow-through that matters. Dominic spent 3 days preparing himself for what he had to do. 3 days of rehearsing what he would say, imagining every possible scenario, every possible reaction. 3 days of barely sleeping, barely eating, consumed by anxiety and guilt and a desperate hope that somehow, impossibly, this might work. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. Not his father. Not his assistant. Not the board. He simply got in his car one Thursday morning and drove to the address James had given him. The clinic where Amira worked was located in a neighborhood that had clearly seen better days. The building was old but well-maintained, with a sign out front that read Riverside Community Health Center. There were people in the waiting room when Dominic walked in, families with young children, elderly patients, people who looked like they were struggling just to get by. This was Amira's world now. Not expensive restaurants or lake houses or quiet bookstores. But a place where she could make a real difference in people's lives. Dominic approached the reception desk, his heart pounding. "I'm looking for Amira Lawson. Is she working today?" The receptionist, a young woman with kind eyes, checked her computer. "She is, but she's with a patient right now. Can I ask what this is regarding?" "It's personal. I'm an old friend. I can wait." She nodded and gestured to the waiting area. "It might be a while. We're pretty busy today." "That's fine. I'll wait." Dominic sat down in one of the plastic chairs, feeling completely out of place in his expensive suit. He watched the flow of patients, saw Amira's colleagues moving through the clinic with practiced efficiency, heard the sounds of children crying and people coughing and life happening all around him. An hour passed. Then another. Dominic didn't move. Couldn't move. This was too important. Finally, a door opened, and Amira emerged with an elderly patient, her hand on the woman's arm, speaking to her in a gentle, reassuring tone. She walked the patient to the front desk, made sure she had her prescriptions and her follow-up appointment, and then turned back toward the hallway. That's when she saw him. For a moment, neither of them moved. They just stared at each other across the busy clinic waiting room, 10 years of silence and pain and unanswered questions hanging in the air between them. Amira's face went pale. Her hand reached out to steady herself against the wall. Her lips moved, forming his name, but no sound came out. Dominic stood up slowly, his legs unsteady. He took a step toward her, then stopped, suddenly aware that he had no right to approach her, no right to be here at all. "Amira," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Please. I need to talk to you." She shook her head, not in refusal but in disbelief. "What are you doing here? Can we go somewhere private? Please." She looked around the clinic, at the curious eyes watching them, at her colleagues who were pretending not to stare. She closed her eyes briefly, took a deep breath, and then nodded. "Follow me." She led him down a hallway to a small office, barely more than a closet with a desk and 2 chairs. She closed the door behind them and stood with her back against it, her arms crossed, her expression guarded. "You have 5 minutes," she said. "Talk." Dominic had rehearsed this moment 100 times, but now that he was here, facing her, all his carefully prepared words evaporated. He looked at her, at the woman he had loved and abandoned, and felt the full weight of what he had done. "I'm dying," he said simply. Amira's arms dropped. "What?" "I have a rare blood disorder. Hematologic mitochondrial degeneration. The doctors say I have maybe 2 to 3 years without treatment. The only viable treatment is a genetic stem cell infusion from a biological match." He paused, his throat tight. "From a biological child." Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed immediately by anger. "So that's why you're here. After 10 years. Not because you wanted to know if I was okay. Not because you wondered about your children. But because you need something from us. Amira. Do you have any idea what you put me through?" Her voice was shaking now, years of suppressed pain rising to the surface. "I was carrying 4 babies. 4. I was terrified and sick and alone. I lost my job because I couldn't work. I nearly lost the apartment. I ate rice and potatoes for months because I couldn't afford anything else. And where were you? You were on magazine covers. You were building your empire. You were living your perfect life while I was fighting just to survive. I know. God, Amira, I know. And I'm so sorry." "Sorry?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're sorry. 10 years, Dominic. 10 years of silence. And now you show up because you need us to save your life. I don't deserve your help. I know that. I don't deserve to even be in the same room as you or those children. But I'm begging you. Please. Let me meet them. Let the doctors run tests. If one of them is a match, if one of them can help, I'll do anything. I'll pay for their college. I'll set up trust funds. I'll..." "Stop." Amira's voice was cold. "You think this is about money? You think you can just throw cash at the situation and make it okay? No. No, I don't. But I have to try. I have to do something." Amira stared at him for a long moment. Then she moved to the desk and sat down heavily, suddenly looking exhausted. "They don't know who you are. They've asked about you over the years, but I told them you live far away and can't be part of their lives. I never badmouthed you. I never told them you abandoned us. I wanted them to have the option of forming their own opinions if you ever came back. But you didn't think I would." "No. I didn't. I thought you'd forgotten we existed." Dominic sank into the other chair. "I thought about you every day. All of you. I convinced myself I'd made the right choice, that I had to focus on my career, that I couldn't afford distractions. But it was all a lie. The truth is I was a coward. I was scared of the responsibility, scared of failing, scared of losing control. So I ran. And I've regretted it every single day since." Amira was silent, her eyes searching his face. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I have nothing left to lose. My career. It doesn't matter anymore. My reputation. Who cares? The only thing that matters is those 4 children, and the fact that I wasn't there for them when they needed me. If I die without ever knowing them, without ever trying to make things right, then my whole life will have been for nothing. You can't just walk into their lives and play dad, Dominic. They have a life. A routine. They're happy. And I won't let you hurt them. I don't want to hurt them. I want to know them. Even if it's just for a little while. Even if they hate me. I need them to know that they exist, that they matter, that their father is sorry." Amira pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed. "This is too much. I need time to think. I understand. Take all the time you need. But Amira, please. My doctors say time is the one thing I don't have." She looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw not anger but something else. Sadness. Confusion. Maybe even a trace of the feelings she'd once had for him. "I'll think about it," she said finally. "But I'm not making any promises. And if I decide to let you meet them, it will be on my terms. Not yours. Understood? Understood. Thank you. Thank you so much." He stood to leave, but paused at the door. "Amira? For what it's worth, you were right. What I built wasn't worth it. Not even close." Amira didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet sounds of her children sleeping in their rooms down the hall. For beautiful, precious souls who had been her entire world for 10 years. And now their father, the man who abandoned them, wanted back into their lives. Part of her wanted to tell him no. To protect her children from potential hurt. To keep their safe, stable world intact. But another part of her, the part that had once loved Dominic, the part that believed in second chances and forgiveness, wondered if maybe this was meant to happen. The children deserved to know their father. Even if he had made terrible mistakes. Even if he didn't deserve their forgiveness. They deserved the truth and the choice. And if one of them could save his life, didn't they deserve to know that too? Grace found her sitting at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, a cup of cold tea in front of her. Can't sleep? Her mother asked, sitting down beside her. Mom, something happened today. Dominic showed up at the clinic. Grace's eyes widened. Dominic? After all these years? Amira told her everything. About the illness. About his request. About the genetic testing. When she finished, Grace was quiet for a long time. What are you going to do? She asked finally. I don't know. Part of me wants to tell him to disappear again. But the kids, they deserve to know. Don't they? Grace took her daughter's hand. Only you can make that decision, baby. But I'll tell you what I think. Those children are strong. You raised them to be strong. They can handle the truth. And if their father is truly sorry, if he's truly changed, maybe they deserve the chance to know him. Not for his sake. But for theirs. What if he hurts them again? Then you'll be there to pick up the pieces. Like you always have been. But you can't protect them from everything, Amira. Sometimes you have to let them face hard things so they can grow. Amira nodded slowly. I'm scared, Mom. I know. But you're also one of the strongest people I've ever known. You'll figure out the right thing to do. You always do. 3 days later, Amira called Dominic. Her hands were shaking as she dialed the number he'd left with her. He answered on the first ring. Amira? I've thought about it. And I've decided to tell the children about you. But I'm doing it my way, on my timeline. And if at any point I feel like this is hurting them, it stops. Understood? Yes. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank me yet. I'm doing this for them, not for you. They deserve to know their father. Even if their father doesn't deserve them. I know. I understand. I'm going to tell them this weekend. After that, if they want to meet you, we'll arrange something. If they don't, you'll respect their decision. Of course. Whatever they want. Amira hung up before he could say anything else. Her heart was racing. She had just made a decision that would change everything, and there was no going back now. That Saturday morning, Amira gathered her 4 children in the living room. They sat on the couch, sensing something important was about to happen. Elijah's eyes were wary. Zara's chin was up, defiant already. Caleb looked worried. Nadia was bouncing slightly, curious. What's going on, Mom? Zara asked. Amira sat down in the chair across from them, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. I need to talk to you all about something important. About your father. The room went still. 4 pairs of eyes locked onto her. You all know that your father hasn't been part of your lives. I told you he lives far away, and that's true in a sense. But the full truth is more complicated than that. She took a deep breath. Your father's name is Dominic Hale. When I found out I was pregnant with you 4, I told him. And he wasn't ready. He was scared and focused on his career, and he made a choice to leave. It was his choice, not yours. You didn't do anything wrong. He didn't want us. Caleb asked, his voice small. Amira's heart broke. He was scared, sweetheart. Sometimes adults make bad choices when they're scared. But here's the thing. He came to see me this week. For the first time in 10 years. And he told me something. He's very sick. He has a disease that's making him sicker, and the doctors say he needs help from a biological match to get better. Zara's eyes narrowed. So he only came back because he needs something from us. That's what brought him back, yes. But he also told me that he's sorry. That he's regretted his choice every day. That he wants to know you, even if you don't want to know him. Elijah, always the thoughtful one, spoke quietly. What kind of help does he need? The doctors would need to run tests to see if any of you are a genetic match. If you are, they could use some of your stem cells to help treat his disease. It's not dangerous to you, but it's your choice. All of this is your choice. You don't have to meet him. You don't have to help him. I just wanted you to know the truth. Nadia leaned forward. What if we want to meet him? Then we'll arrange it. But only if you want to. The four children looked at each other, that silent communication that only siblings who've been through everything together could share. Finally, Zara spoke. We want to meet him. But not because we forgive him. We want to see who he is. And then we'll decide if we want to help. Amira nodded, her eyes filling with tears. Okay. I'll set it up. The meeting was arranged for the following weekend at Amira's house. Neutral territory. Safe. Dominic arrived exactly on time, his hands trembling as he rang the doorbell. He dressed casually, not wanting to seem like the wealthy CEO but just a man meeting his children for the first time. Amira opened the door. They're nervous. And protective of each other. Don't expect this to be easy. I don't. I just want the chance to meet them. She led him into the living room where four children sat on the couch, shoulder to shoulder, a united front. Dominic stopped in the doorway, his breath catching. They were real. They were here. They were his. Kids, Amira said gently. This is Dominic Hale. Your father. Four pairs of eyes studied him with an intensity that made him feel completely exposed. He could see himself in them. Elijah had his analytical gaze. Zara had his strong jawline. Caleb had his sensitive eyes. Nadia had his curious energy. But they also had Amira. Her warmth. Her strength. Her compassion. Hi, Dominic said, his voice cracking. I know this is strange. I know you probably have a lot of questions. And I know I don't deserve to be here. But I want you to know that I'm sorry. For not being there. For missing 9 years of your lives. For leaving your mom when she needed me most. Zara spoke first, her voice hard. Why did you leave? Dominic met her gaze, refusing to look away. Because I was scared. And selfish. And stupid. I thought my career was more important than being a father. I was wrong. Do you have other kids? Elijah asked. No. Just you four. You're my only children. Why didn't you ever try to find us before? Caleb's voice was soft but the question cut deep. Because I was a coward. I told myself you were better off without me. That your mom would find someone better, someone who deserved you. But the truth is, I was just too ashamed to face what I'd done. Nadia tilted her head. Are you really sick? Yes. I am. I have a disease that's slowly making me sicker. The doctors say I don't have much time without treatment. And you need us to save you? Zara's tone was accusatory. I need to know if one of you might be able to help. But I don't expect you to. You don't owe me anything. I'm the one who owes you. 9 years of birthdays and holidays and school plays and everything else I missed. I owe you a lifetime of being there, and I wasn't. So no. I'm not asking you to save me. I'm asking for the chance to know you, even if it's just for a little while. The children were silent, processing his words. Then Elijah spoke. We'll do the test. But we're not promising anything after that. Dominic's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. The genetic testing was done 2 days later at a private medical facility. Dr. White oversaw the process personally, drawing blood samples from each child while Amira held their hands and Dominic waited in another room, too anxious to sit still. The tests would take 72 hours to process. 3 days of waiting. 3 days of not knowing. During those 3 days, Dominic asked Amira if he could spend more time with the children. She agreed, but only in her presence, and only if the kids wanted to. To his surprise, they did. They were curious about him, these 4 children who had lived their whole lives knowing their father existed but never knowing who he was. They asked him questions. About his work. About his life. About why he really left. And Dominic answered honestly. He didn't try to make excuses or paint himself as a victim. He owned his mistakes. He told them about the pressure he'd felt, the fear, the terrible choice he'd made. He told them about the years of regret, the emptiness of his success, the guilt that had haunted him. "Do you have a lot of money?" Nadia asked one afternoon as they sat in Amira's backyard. "Yes. I do." "Then why didn't you ever send any to Mom? She worked really hard to take care of us." The question was innocent, but it hit him like a punch to the gut. "Because I was trying to pretend you didn't exist. If I sent money, it would make it real. And I wasn't brave enough to face that reality. Your mom shouldn't have had to struggle. That's my fault." Zara studied him. "If you could go back, would you do it differently?" "In a heartbeat. I would have stayed. I would have been there for your mom through the pregnancy. I would have been there when you were born. I would have changed diapers and done midnight feedings and been the father you deserved. But I can't go back. All I can do is try to be better now." "That's a lot to make up for," she said. "I know. And I probably never will. But I'm going to try anyway." Elijah had been quiet through most of these conversations, but one evening he pulled Dominic aside. "I looked you up online," he said. "You're really rich. You run a big company. You're kind of famous." "I suppose so. Does that make you happy?" Dominic looked at this thoughtful, serious boy who asked the kind of questions most adults couldn't answer. "No. It doesn't. It used to feel important. But now I realize I spent 10 years building something that doesn't actually matter. What matters is family. People. Love. And I threw all of that away for something that means nothing in the end." Elijah nodded slowly. "I think you're finally starting to get it." Caleb was the gentlest of the 4, the one who cried easily and felt things deeply. One afternoon, he sat next to Dominic on the porch steps. "I used to wonder what you were like," Caleb said softly. "I'd make up stories in my head about why you weren't here. Sometimes I'd imagine you were a spy or an astronaut or doing something really important that meant you couldn't come home." Dominic's throat tightened. "I'm sorry I wasn't the dad you imagined." "Me too. But maybe you can be the dad we need now." On the 3rd day, Dr. White called. Dominic and Amira went to the hospital together, leaving the children with Grace. They sat in Dr. White's office, barely breathing as she opened the file. "The results are in," she said. "And I have good news. One of your children is a perfect match." Dominic's hands flew to his face. Amira grabbed the edge of the desk to steady herself. "Which one?" Amira whispered. "Caleb. He's a complete genetic match. With stem cells from him, we can proceed with the treatment. There's an excellent chance of success." Dominic broke down completely. He sobbed, not quietly or with dignity, but with the raw, overwhelming emotion of a man who had just been given a second chance at life by the child he'd abandoned. Amira watched him fall apart, and something inside her shifted. This wasn't the cold, calculating CEO who had walked away from her. This was a broken man who had finally understood what he'd lost and was desperate to make it right. "Caleb," Dominic gasped between sobs. "My gentle, sweet Caleb. He's going to save my life." Dr. White gave them privacy. Amira sat beside Dominic as he cried, and after a moment, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not forgiveness. Not yet. But comfort. Human compassion for someone in pain. He'll need to understand what this means, Amira said quietly. He'll need to know that he's helping you, that it's safe, that he's not in any danger. I'll tell him. I'll explain everything. And if he doesn't want to do it, I'll accept that. He'll do it. Caleb has the biggest heart of all of them. If he knows he can help, he'll want to. That evening, they told the children together. All four of them sat on the couch again, Amira and Dominic standing in front of them. The test results came back, Amira said. And one of you is a match. 4 pairs of eyes waited. Caleb, Dominic said, his voice gentle. You're a perfect match. Which means your stem cells could help treat my disease and give me a chance to live longer. Caleb's eyes widened. Me? Yes, buddy. You. But I need you to understand something. This is completely your choice. If you don't want to do it, if you're scared or unsure, that's okay. You don't owe me anything. Caleb looked at his siblings, then at his mother. Will it hurt? Dar. White had provided Amira with information to help explain the process. It's not painful. They'll give you medicine to make you sleepy, and they'll collect some cells from your blood. You might be a little tired afterward, but you'll be fine. It's very safe. And it will help him? Yes, baby. It could save his life. Caleb looked at Dominic, really looked at him. You're my dad. Yes. And you're sorry? More sorry than I can ever express. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'll do it. I want to help. Dominic knelt down in front of him, tears streaming down his face. Thank you. Thank you so much. You're an amazing kid, Caleb. You're better than I'll ever be. Caleb reached out hesitantly and touched his father's face. Maybe you can try to be better. For us. I will. I promise you I will. The other 3 children watched this exchange. Elijah with his analytical calm. Zara with her protective intensity. Nadia with her curious compassion. And slowly, carefully, they began to soften toward this man who was trying so desperately to make amends. The procedure was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In that time, Dominic spent as much time with his children as Amira would allow. He came to their soccer games. He helped with homework. He read bedtime stories. He learned their favorite foods, their fears, their dreams. He was awkward at first. 9 years of missed parenting couldn't be made up overnight. But he tried. He showed up. He listened. He apologized when he got things wrong. And slowly, impossibly, the children began to see him not just as the man who abandoned them, but as a flawed human being who was trying to do better. Zara was the hardest to win over. She didn't trust easily, and she'd spent 9 years being the protector of her siblings. One evening, she cornered Dominic in the kitchen. If you hurt my mom or my siblings again, I don't care how sick you are. I'll never forgive you. Dominic looked into her fierce eyes and saw himself. That same determination. That same intensity. I won't. I swear to you, Zara. I'm here for the long haul. Whatever happens. Words are easy. Prove it with actions. I will. Every single day. She studied him for a moment longer, then nodded curtly and walked away. It wasn't acceptance. But it was a beginning. The day of the procedure arrived. Caleb was nervous but brave. Amira held his hand as they prepped him, talking to him softly, telling him how proud she was. You're saving a life, baby. That's an incredible thing. Will he be okay? Caleb asked. The doctors are hopeful. But even if the treatment works, it will take time. I'm glad I can help. Even if he wasn't there before, he's trying now. That has to count for something, right? Amira kissed his forehead. Yes, sweetheart. That counts for a lot. Dominic was waiting outside the procedure room. When they brought Caleb out after the extraction, still groggy from the sedation, Dominic took his small hand. Thank you, son. You just gave me the greatest gift anyone's ever given me. A second chance. Caleb smiled sleepily. Just don't waste it, Dad. The word hit Dominic like lightning. Dad. Caleb had called him Dad. He looked up at Amira, tears in his eyes. She was crying too. The treatment began immediately. Dominic underwent the stem cell infusion, a process that would take weeks to show results but offered real hope for the first time since his diagnosis. During his recovery, the children visited him in the hospital. They brought him drawings and cards and stories about school. They sat by his bed and told him about their lives, filling in 9 years of gaps. Nadia showed him a photo album Amira had kept. This is us when we were babies. And this is our first day of kindergarten. And this is when Zara broke her arm playing soccer. And this is Elijah winning the science fair. Dominic looked at each photo, his heart breaking for all the moments he'd missed. You were all so small. I can't believe I wasn't there to see you grow up. You're here now, Elijah said pragmatically. That's what matters. Is it enough? Dominic asked. Can I ever make up for what I missed? The 4 children looked at each other, that silent sibling communication again. You can't change the past, Zara said. But you can change the future. So yeah. It's enough. If you keep trying. Over the following months, Dominic's health slowly improved. The stem cell infusion was working. His blood counts were stabilizing. The disease was going into remission. Dr. White was cautiously optimistic that he could live a normal life if he maintained treatment and monitoring. But more important than his physical recovery was the healing happening between him and his family. He moved out of his penthouse and bought a house in the same neighborhood as Amira. Not too close. But close enough to be present. To be available. To be a dad. He cut back his hours at Hale Properties, delegating more responsibility to his team. His father was surprised but supportive. You're finally learning what I tried to teach you too late, Richard said. The company will survive without you. Your family won't. Dominic started attending school events. He embarrassed himself trying to coach Zara's soccer team, making Amira laugh for the first time in years. He helped Elijah with science projects, combining their analytical minds. He took Nadia to art classes and encouraged her wild creativity. And he spent quiet evenings with Caleb, reading books and talking about feelings and building a relationship based on gentleness and trust. Amira watched all of this with a mixture of emotions. She was glad her children had their father. She could see how much it meant to them, how they were flourishing with his attention and love. But she kept her distance emotionally. She'd been hurt too deeply to trust easily. Until one evening when Dominic showed up at her door with takeout from the diner they used to go to 10 years ago. I know you probably don't want to spend time with me, he said. But I was hoping we could talk. Just the two of us. Amira hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. The kids were at her parents' house for the night. The house was quiet. They ate in silence for a while. Then Dominic spoke. I need to say something. And I need you to really hear me, not as the father of your children, but as the man who loved you and destroyed what we had. Amira set down her fork, waiting. I am so sorry. Not just for leaving. Not just for missing 10 years. But for making you feel like you didn't matter. Like our love didn't matter. Because it did. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, and I threw it away because I was too blind to see what actually mattered in life. Dominic. Please. Let me finish. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I can never undo the pain I caused you. But I want you to know that every success I had in the last 10 years was hollow because you weren't there to share it with. Every award, every achievement, every moment that was supposed to feel like a victory just felt empty. Because the only thing that would have made it meaningful was having you by my side. Amira's eyes filled with tears. You broke my heart. You left me when I was at my most vulnerable. Do you know what that did to me? How many nights I cried myself to sleep, wondering what I did wrong, wondering why I wasn't enough. You were always enough. You were everything. I was the one who wasn't enough. I was the one who failed. And now what? You want me to just forgive and forget? Pretend like the last 10 years didn't happen? No. I want to earn your trust back. Day by day. Month by month. Year by year. However long it takes. I'm not asking for romance. I'm not asking for love. I'm asking for the chance to prove that I've changed. That I'm not the coward I was 10 years ago. Amira was silent for a long time. I don't know if I can do this, Dominic. I don't know if I can open myself up to you again. I understand. And I'll respect whatever you decide. But I want you to know something. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. I was just too stupid and scared to fight for what we had. The healing didn't happen overnight. It took months of slow, careful rebuilding. Dominic proved himself not with grand gestures but with consistent presence. He showed up for the kids. He supported Amira. He respected her boundaries. He never pushed. And gradually, carefully, Amira's walls began to come down. They started having coffee together after dropping the kids at school. They talked about everything. Their childhoods. Their dreams. Their regrets. They laughed at shared memories and cried over lost time. One evening, 6 months after Dominic's treatment had ended successfully, they were sitting on Amira's porch watching the sunset. The kids were inside doing homework. Everything was peaceful. Can I ask you something? Amira said softly. Anything. Do you ever wish things had been different? That you'd made a different choice 10 years ago? Every single day. But I also know that wishing doesn't change anything. The only thing I can do is try to be the man I should have been. Starting now. Amira turned to look at him. You're doing better. With the kids. They really love you, you know. I love them too. They're the most amazing people I've ever known. And that's because of you. Because you raised them to be kind and strong and compassionate. You did that alone, when you shouldn't have had to. I wasn't completely alone. I had my parents. And I had the kids. They gave me a reason to keep going. You're an incredible mother, Amira. And an incredible woman. I'm sorry it took me almost dying to realize what I'd lost. She smiled sadly. Maybe some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Maybe. But I'm grateful for the lesson. Even if I didn't deserve the second chance. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Amira reached over and took his hand. It was the first time she'd initiated physical contact since he'd come back into her life. I'm not ready to forgive you completely, she said. I don't know if I'll ever be. But I'm willing to try. To see where this goes. For the kids. And maybe for us. Dominic squeezed her hand gently. That's all I'm asking for. Just a chance. A year after Dominic's return, the family dynamic had shifted in ways no one could have predicted. The children had fully embraced their father, not because they'd forgotten what he'd done, but because he'd proven himself worthy of a second chance. Elijah, now 10, had developed a close bond with Dominic over their shared love of problem-solving. They spent hours working on complex puzzles and discussing business strategy. Dominic was teaching him about the real estate industry, not to pressure him into following that path, but to share his knowledge and passion. You know what's interesting? Elijah said one Saturday afternoon as they worked on a model of a building design. You could have done all this 10 years ago. Been a dad and run your company. Lots of people do both. Dominic paused, considering his son's observation. You're absolutely right. I could have. I chose not to because I was afraid and selfish. That's the difference between can't and won't. I told myself I couldn't do it, but the truth was I wouldn't try. At least you figured it out eventually. Better late than never. Elijah smiled. Yeah. Better late than never. Zara had become a fierce advocate for her father, defending him to other kids at school who made comments about him not being around before. She'd inherited his protective instinct and his determination, channeling both into soccer and academics. She was the top of her class and the captain of her team. You know what I realized, she told Dominic one evening after he'd watched her score 3 goals in a game. I used to be angry that you weren't there. But now I think maybe it made me stronger. I had to be the protector. And that's not a bad thing to be. You're an amazing protector, Dominic said. But you also deserve to just be a kid sometimes. You don't always have to be strong. Mom taught us that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up. You fell down pretty hard, Dad. But you got back up. That takes guts. Dominic pulled her into a hug. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just weren't around to notice. He laughed, even though the words stung a little. But that was okay. She was allowed to remind him. They all were. Caleb had become Dominic's shadow in many ways. The gentle boy who had saved his father's life with his stem cells had formed the deepest emotional connection with Dominic. They shared a sensitivity, a depth of feeling that the others didn't quite understand. Do you ever get scared? Caleb asked one night when Dominic was tucking him in. It was a routine Dominic had claimed as his own, this sacred half-hour before bed when he got to talk to each child individually. Of what, buddy? That you'll get sick again. That the treatment won't keep working. Dominic sat on the edge of the bed. Sometimes. But then I remember that I have you 4 and your mom, and even if I did get sick again, I'd still be grateful for every moment I get to spend with you. I'm glad you're better, Dad. I'm glad I could help. You did more than help, Caleb. You saved my life. And more than that, you taught me what real courage looks like. You were braver at 9 years old than I've been my entire life. Caleb hugged him tightly. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. So much. Nadia, the wildest and most creative of the 4, had found a kindred spirit in her father's hidden artistic side. Dominic had never pursued art or creativity, always focused on business and numbers. But Nadia brought it out of him, challenging him to paint with her, to draw, to see the world through an artist's eyes. You're not very good at this, she said bluntly one Sunday afternoon as they painted together in the backyard. She was working on an abstract piece full of bright colors. Dominic was attempting a landscape that looked more like a blob than a tree. I know. But it's fun anyway. That's the point of art. It doesn't have to be good. It just has to mean something to you. You're very wise for someone who's only 10. She grinned. Mom says we had to grow up fast. But that's okay. We turned out pretty great. You really did. All 4 of you are remarkable. Do you think if you'd been around from the beginning, we'd be different? It was a heavy question from such a young soul. Dominic set down his paintbrush and turned to face her fully. Honestly? I think you'd still be amazing, because you have an amazing mother. But maybe you wouldn't have had to struggle as much. Maybe things would have been easier. I wish I could have given you that. But then maybe we wouldn't appreciate what we have now. Mom always says that hard times teach us to be grateful for the good times. Your mom is a very smart woman. The smartest, Nadia agreed. Are you going to marry her again? We were never married, sweetie. But I'd like to. Someday. If she'll have me. I think she will. She looks at you differently now. Like she used to look at you in the old pictures Grandma showed us. Dominic's heart swelled. You really think so? I know so. I'm an artist. I notice things. The turning point came on a Thursday evening in spring, almost exactly 2 years after Dominic had walked back into their lives. Amira had agreed to go to dinner with him, just the two of them. A real date. Their first in over a decade. Dominic picked her up at 7. He brought flowers, not roses or anything elaborate, but wildflowers from the farmer's market, the kind she used to love. You remembered, she said softly, taking the bouquet. I remember everything about you, Amira. I always have. They drove to the same diner where they'd had their first real conversation all those years ago. It had changed ownership but still had the same worn booths and the same cozy atmosphere. They ordered coffee and pie, and for a while, they just talked. About the kids. About work. About ordinary, everyday things. But beneath the surface, there was something else. Attention. An awareness. Finally, Dominic set down his fork and looked at her directly. I need to tell you something. And I need you to hear me without interrupting. Can you do that? Amira nodded, her heart beating faster. When I left you 12 years ago, I told myself I was making the right choice. That I was being practical and smart and focused. But the truth is, I was terrified. Terrified of failing as a father. Terrified of not being enough. Terrified of losing control of my perfectly planned life. So I ran. And I've spent every day since then regretting that choice. He reached across the table and took her hand. These last 2 years have been the best of my life. Not because of my health improving, though I'm grateful for that. But because I got to know my children. I got to be their father. And I got to fall in love with you all over again. Amira's breath caught. I know I don't deserve you. I know I can never fully make up for the pain I caused. But I want to try. I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that I'm not the man I was. I'm better now. You made me better. Those kids made me better. And I don't want to waste another single day without you. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple, elegant ring. Amira Lawson, will you marry me? Will you give me the chance to be the husband I should have been and the father our children deserve? Will you let me spend every day of the rest of my life loving you the way you've always deserved to be loved? Amira stared at the ring, tears streaming down her face. Part of her wanted to say yes immediately. But another part, the part that had been hurt so deeply, hesitated. Dominic, She paused, collecting her thoughts. 2 years ago, if you had asked me if I'd ever forgive you, I would have said no. Absolutely not. You hurt me in ways I didn't think I could recover from. You abandoned our children before they even took their first breath. That's not something I can just forget. His face fell, but he nodded. I understand. But, she continued, you've shown me something over these last 2 years. You've shown me that people can change. That mistakes, even terrible ones, don't have to define us forever. You've been patient and consistent and present. You've earned my children's love through action, not just words. And you've slowly, carefully, earned back my trust. She reached across the table and took the ring box from him. I'm not the same woman I was 12 years ago. That Amira was younger, more naive, more willing to believe in fairy tales. The woman I am now has been through hell and come out stronger. I don't need you to complete me, Dominic. I don't need you to save me. I already saved myself. I know. That's one of the things I love most about you. But, she said, a smile breaking through her tears, I think I'm ready to let you stand beside me. As a partner. As an equal. As the father of my children and maybe, just maybe, as my husband. Is that a yes? Yes, Dominic. It's a yes. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me that if things get hard, if life throws us challenges, you won't run. Promise me you'll stay and fight for us. For our family. No matter what. Dominic stood up and moved to her side of the booth, sliding in beside her. He took her face in his hands. I promise. I swear on everything I am and everything I have. I will never run again. I will fight for us every single day. I will be the man you and our children deserve. And I will love you until my last breath. He kissed her then, soft and tender and full of promise. And in that moment, surrounded by the ghosts of their past and the hope of their future, they both felt something shift. A door closing on old wounds. A window opening on new possibilities. They told the children the next morning. All four of them were sitting at the breakfast table when Dominic and Amira walked in together, their hands intertwined. We have something to tell you, Amira said, her voice warm with happiness. Four pairs of curious eyes looked up from their cereal. Your dad asked me to marry him last night, she continued. And I said yes. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then Nadia squealed with delight and jumped up, running to hug them both. Caleb's face broke into a huge smile. Elijah nodded approvingly, as if this was a logical next step he'd already calculated. And Zara, tough, protective Zara, had tears in her eyes. Does this mean we're going to be a real family? Zara asked, her voice catching. Dominic knelt down in front of her. We've always been a real family, sweetheart. From the moment you were born. I just wasn't there to be part of it. But yes. This means I'm going to be here officially. Forever. If that's okay with you. Zara threw her arms around his neck. It's okay with me, Dad. More than okay. The six of them stood in the kitchen, wrapped in a group hug, crying and laughing and holding on to each other. A family broken and rebuilt. Imperfect. Complicated. But real. The wedding was small and intimate, held in Amira's backyard on a beautiful Saturday afternoon in June. Grace and Mike were there, along with a handful of close friends. Richard Hale stood beside his son as best man, his eyes suspiciously wet throughout the ceremony. But the real stars of the day were the four children. Elijah and Caleb served as groomsmen. Zara and Nadia were bridesmaids. They stood on either side of their parents, a physical representation of the family they'd become. When it came time for the vows, Dominic's voice shook with emotion. Amira, 12 years ago I made the worst mistake of my life when I walked away from you. I convinced myself that success and ambition were more important than love. I was wrong. You are the strongest, most incredible person I've ever known. You took 4 tiny lives and raised them into remarkable human beings, all while building a career and maintaining your dignity and grace. You didn't just survive. You thrived. And I am in awe of you. He turned to look at the children. Elijah, Zara, Caleb, Nadia. I know I haven't been the father you deserved. I missed your first steps, your first words, your first days of school. I missed birthdays and holidays and 1,000 precious moments. I can never get those back. But I promise you, from this day forward, I will be there. For every game, every recital, every triumph and every heartbreak. I will be your dad, not just in name, but in action. And I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you. There wasn't a dry eye in the gathering. Amira's vows were equally powerful. Dominic, when you came back into my life 2 years ago, I was angry. Hurt. Defensive. I wanted to protect my children from being disappointed again. But you surprised me. You didn't try to buy your way back in. You didn't make excuses or play the victim. You owned your mistakes and you worked, day by day, to earn back our trust. And somehow, impossibly, you did. She smiled through her tears. This isn't a fairy tale. We both know that. We've been through too much pain for this to be simple or easy. But it's real. And it's ours. And I choose to believe in second chances. I choose to believe that people can change. I choose to believe in us. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the children cheered louder than anyone. And when Dominic kissed his bride, it felt like the beginning of something new. Not a erasing of the past, but a building on it. Taking the broken pieces and creating something beautiful. Life wasn't perfect after the wedding. There were still hard days. Still moments when old wounds would resurface. Still times when Amira would look at Dominic and remember the pain he'd caused. But there were also moments of profound joy. Family dinners filled with laughter. Weekend trips to the lake house, where they created new memories to layer over the old ones. School events where both parents showed up, together. Bedtime routines and homework help in ordinary, everyday moments that meant everything. Dominic sold his stake in Hale Properties, stepping away from the CEO role to focus on his family. He started a non-profit foundation dedicated to supporting single parents and children in difficult circumstances, channeling his wealth and experience into something that actually mattered. Amira continued her work at the clinic, but with the financial security Dominic provided, she was able to cut back her hours and spend more time with the children. She also started teaching nursing classes at the community college, sharing her knowledge with the next generation. The children flourished. Elijah was accepted into a prestigious science program. Zara earned a soccer scholarship to an elite training academy. Caleb discovered a love for music and started playing piano. Nadia's artwork was featured in a local gallery. And through it all, they remained close. The four of them and their parents. A family forged not in ideal circumstances, but in the fire of hardship and the triumph of perseverance. 5 years after the reunion, Dominic sat on the porch of their new home, watching the sun set over the backyard where his teenage children were playing soccer. Amira came out and sat beside him, handing him a glass of iced tea. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how close I came to missing all of this. If I hadn't gotten sick, if I hadn't needed their help, I never would have come back. I would have died alone in that penthouse, never knowing what I'd lost. Never knowing them. Never having the chance to make things right with you." Amira took his hand. "Do you think that's why you got sick? Some kind of cosmic intervention? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe it was just biology and bad luck. But whatever the reason, I'm grateful." Is that terrible? To be grateful for something that could have killed me? No. I don't think so. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best outcomes. Not because the bad thing was good, but because we learned from it. We grew from it. Out in the yard, Caleb scored a goal and his siblings tackled him in celebration. Dominic smiled, watching them. "He saved my life, you know. Caleb. Not just with his stem cells, but with his forgiveness. All of them did. And you. You gave me a second chance I didn't deserve. You earned it," Amira said simply. "Every day for 5 years, you've shown up. You've been present. You've been the father and husband you should have been from the beginning. That's worth something. I wasted 10 years. You can't change that. But you haven't wasted a single day since you came back. That's what matters now." Dominic turned to look at his wife, this incredible woman who had every reason to hate him but chose love instead. "I love you, Amira. More than I can ever express. I know. I love you too. Not because I've forgotten what happened. But because I've seen who you've become. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their children play as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink. And in that moment, Dominic Hale understood something profound. Success wasn't measured in money or power or magazine covers. It wasn't measured in quarterly earnings or stock prices or board meetings. Success was measured in love. In family. In the laughter of children who forgave their father. In the trust of a woman who gave him a second chance. In ordinary moments that felt extraordinary because they were shared with the people who mattered most. He had spent years building an empire, but it was here, in this modest home with this extraordinary family, that he'd finally found his kingdom. 10 years after the reunion, the quadruplets were 19 years old. Elijah was in medical school, following in his mother's footsteps. Zara was playing professional soccer in Europe, fierce and fearless and unstoppable. Caleb was studying music therapy, using his gentle spirit to help others heal. And Nadia was in art school, her wild creativity finally finding a home where it could flourish. They all came home for Christmas that year. The whole family together in the house Dominic and Amira had built, quite literally. They designed and constructed their dream home on a piece of land outside the city, a place big enough for everyone to have their own space but with a massive communal area where they could all gather. On Christmas Eve, after dinner, Caleb pulled out his guitar and started playing. It was a song he'd written himself, a melody that was both melancholy and hopeful. And then he started to sing. The lyrics were about family. About loss and redemption. About a father who left and came back. About a mother who held everything together. About 4 children who learned that love could triumph over pain if you were willing to forgive. By the time he finished, everyone was crying. Even Zara, who prided herself on being tough. That was beautiful, honey, Amira said, wiping her eyes. I wrote it for all of us, Caleb said. For our family. Because our story isn't perfect, but it's ours. And I wouldn't change it. Dominic stood up and raised his glass. I want to make a toast. To the 4 most amazing people I've ever known. Elijah, Zara, Caleb, Nadia. You didn't have to forgive me. You didn't have to give me a chance. But you did. And you made me a better man. A better father. A better human being. Everything good in my life started the day you saved me. Not just my life, but my soul. He turned to Amira. And to my wife. The strongest person I know. You could have turned me away. You had every right to. But you chose compassion over bitterness. You chose hope over hurt. You chose us. And I will spend every remaining day of my life being grateful for that choice. To family, Elijah said, raising his glass. To second chances, Zara added. To forgiveness, Caleb said softly. To love, Nadia finished. To all of it, Amira said, her voice thick with emotion. To every hard moment that brought us here. To every struggle that made us stronger. To this beautiful, complicated, imperfect family that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world. They clinked their glasses together, and in that moment, surrounded by the people they loved most, both Dominic and Amira understood that they had come full circle. 20 years ago, Dominic had walked away from 4 heartbeats on an ultrasound screen, too afraid to embrace the responsibility. 20 years ago, Amira had carried those 4 lives alone, fighting against impossible odds. And now, here they all were. Together. Whole. Healed. Not because the past didn't matter, but because they'd chosen to build something new on top of it. Not because forgiveness was easy, but because it was possible. Not because love erased pain, but because it made the pain worthwhile. Late that night, after the children had gone to bed, Dominic and Amira stood on their balcony, looking out at the stars. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if things had been different? Amira asked. If you'd stayed that first time? Sometimes. But then I think maybe we needed the journey. Maybe we needed to break so we could learn how to rebuild stronger. Maybe our children needed to see that even when people make terrible mistakes, they can change. They can grow. They can make amends. That's a very optimistic way of looking at it. I learned it from you. You're the one who taught me that the past doesn't have to define the future. That every day is a chance to be better than we were yesterday. Amira leaned her head against his shoulder. I'm proud of us. Of what we built. Of who we became. Me too. And Amira? Yes. Thank you. For taking me back. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For showing me what real strength looks like. For giving me the greatest gift of my life. Which gift is that? There have been so many. Dominic smiled. All of them. You. The kids. This life. But most of all, the gift of becoming the man I was always meant to be. I couldn't have done that without you. She kissed him softly. We did it together. That's what family means. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for the journey that had brought them to this moment. The journey that had started with 4 heartbeats on an ultrasound screen and ended with a family that proved love could conquer even the deepest wounds. The story of Dominic Hale and Amira Lawson wasn't a fairy tale. It was messy and complicated and filled with pain and regret. But it was also a testament to the power of second chances. To the strength of forgiveness. To the resilience of love. Dominic learned that success means nothing without people to share it with. That ambition without purpose is just noise. That the true measure of a man isn't what he builds, but who he becomes in the process. Amira learned that strength isn't about never needing help. That forgiving someone doesn't mean forgetting what they did. That opening your heart again after it's been broken takes more courage than anything else in the world. And the children, Elijah, Zara, Caleb, and Nadia, learned that families come in all forms. That love can be lost and found again. That their father's mistake didn't define them, but how they chose to respond to it did. They learned that people can change. That redemption is possible. That sometimes the most broken things, when put back together with care and intention, become more beautiful than they ever were before. This is their story. A story of abandonment and reunion. Of sickness and healing. Of 4 heartbeats that changed everything. Of a millionaire who lost what mattered most and fought to get it back. Of a woman who raised an empire of love with nothing but determination and grace. Of children who learned that forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It makes you powerful. And in the end, it's a story about hope. The hope that no matter how far we fall, no matter how badly we fail, no matter how broken we become, there's always a chance to rise again. To do better. To be better. To love better. Because that's what family is. Not perfection. Not ease. Not a lack of struggle. But the choice to keep showing up, keep trying, keep loving, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Dominic walked into that hospital with an apology and a desperate need. He left with something far more valuable. He left with a family. He left with redemption. He left with love. And 4 heartbeats that had once seemed like an ending became the beginning of everything that mattered. The Millionaire CEO finally understood what real wealth looked like. And it had nothing to do with money or power or success. It had everything to do with the people sitting around his dinner table. The laughter echoing through his home. The small hands that reached for his. The woman who chose to love him again despite everything. That was wealth. That was success. That was what it meant to truly live. And as Dominic Hale held his wife close under the stars, surrounded by the sleeping peace of his children in their rooms, he whispered a prayer of gratitude. Not for the empire he'd built. Not for the wealth he'd accumulated. Not for the second chance at life his son's stem cells had given him. But for this. This moment. This family. This love. This was everything. And he would never, ever take it for granted again. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to us becomes the doorway to the best thing that could happen. Not because the pain was good, but because we chose to grow from it. This is the story of one man's journey from ambition to emptiness to redemption. A reminder that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. And that love, when given a second chance, can heal even the deepest wounds. If this story moved you, share with someone who believes in second chances. That's how love multiplies. Subscribe to Mr. Ellington Love Lines for more stories that heal, inspire, and remind you, broken things can still bloom. Leave a comment with one lesson you've taken from the story. Your reflection might inspire our next episode.